Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, kia hia ki ana, te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora. Ko titirangi te maunga, ko waio te awa, ko ngai tamatirangi, Ngāti Hine Waiatarua, me Ngāti Whaitanga Hapu, ko Ngāti Kahungunu Ngā Rauru, me Ngāti Raukawa Ngā Iwi, ko Rangi Āhua Te Marae, ko Meri Wai Paupau Te Tipuna, he kaiputahi Rangahaua Hau, ko Kim Hamilton Taku Ingoa. Welcome all and thanks for joining us this morning. I'd like to acknowledge the community groups and NGOs from throughout Aotearoa and those from government agencies who are looking for insight to inform your work. I'd also acknowledge those who are joining us from other countries around the world. We acknowledge all of those who have been impacted by COVID-19 and recognise that this is a time of great uncertainty and radical transformation of our people, our country and our world. The things that our presenters have to share today are very relevant to how we can work successfully with our whānau and within Te Ao Hurihuri. Throughout this webinar, we invite you to post questions and engage in chat. I can pose your questions to our presenters at the end of their presentation, and you can also log in to the Community Research Discussion Group on our Facebook page to post any questions you may think of following this webinar today. If you want to be notified of when we're broadcasting our next webinar, please join our Facebook page and the Community Research Discussion Group. You can also subscribe to our monthly e-news by emailing communications@communityresearch.org.nz. In today's webinar, we're fortunate to have with us Riana Manuel and Taima Campbell sharing their journey as Māori Hauora implementing Mahi A Atua, a Māori approach to wellbeing. This draws on stories, narratives and healing practices of Te Ao Māori. They're working closely with Dr. Dai Korpua and Mark Korpua, who presented in April on a Wananga of Mahi A Atua. This is a follow-on showing how an organisation implements Te Kūwatawata across their organisation and rohe with their whānau and communities. Our presenters work for Te Korowai Hauora or Hauraki, and they're rural and iwi based. And I'm just going to add in a disclaimer there. We do have a few little glitches with our technology today, so please bear with us. And we've got some riders and some plan Bs if the audio and video don't work so well. Back to Te Korowai Hauora or Hauraki. They have been providing health and wellness services across Hauraki for a long time, for more than 25 years, I understand. The organisation includes doctors, nurses, nurse clinics, prevention, early detection, treatment and management, education, wellness care, mental health services, whānau support, health promotion and public health. They're iwi mandated and a kaupapa Māori NGO in Hauraki, and their aim is to inspire, grow and empower our people towards oranga as they define it. Hauraki Nation, a healthy nation. I'd like to speak first about Riana. She is Ngāti Pūkenga, ki Manaia, Ngāti Maru and Ngāti Kahungunu, kia ora whanaunga. She is the Manukura Hauora or CEO for Te Korowai Hauora or Hauraki. She's a registered nurse by training, and her passion and career has been focused on Māori health across the spectrum. She aspires to use Indigenous models in her life, whether for health, education, in her marriage, raising of children and living in general. She believes that until we decolonise ourselves, we'll never see the true benefits of these concepts, and they sit always beyond our line of sight. Riana's nanny had a saying that stuck with her throughout her life, aroha ki tētahi ki tētahi. This is one of her guiding po and one that she hopes to not only embody but to gift to future generations. Taima Campbell is also joining us today, and she is Ngāti Tamatera, Ngāti Maru and Ngāti Kiriwera. She's also a registered nurse and has more than 35 years experience in child health, Māori health and nursing leadership. She's worked previously for Waikato, Auckland, Counties Manukau DHBs, implementing a range of change management, quality improvement, nursing and workforce development programs. Taima has been part of the hugely successful Ngā Manukura or Āpōpō Māori Nursing and Midwifery Leadership Development Program, and they've supported many Māori nurses and midwives into leadership roles across the whole health system. Taima started in a senior management role with Te Korowai Hauora or Hauraki in 2018, and this role has helped her develop an understanding of the many challenges, and not just technological, in delivering healthcare services to rural communities. Ka nui te mihi kia kōrua. Kei a koe, Riana.
Tēnā koutou e te whānau, tēnā koe Kim o tō tūwheratanga o tēnei wahanga. It's awesome to be here, and of course I don't need to expand on what you've already kind of outlined in terms of my whakapapa, but you know, just really happy to be here and be given the opportunity today. So thank you all, to yourself especially, and Dan, for helping make sure that irrespective of the glitches, we might be able to do justice to this kaupapa whakahirahira, this very important kaupapa, which of course is the implementation of an Indigenous model of care, and of course a huge mihi to Dr. Diana Kopua and Papa Mark Kopua, because of course without those two, we wouldn't be here having this webinar right now. So that sharing of our own Indigenous, our own esoteric knowledge is phenomenal, and huge mihi to the two of them. So there you go. Kia ora, Taima.
Ai, nei rā, he mihi mahana kia koutou no te tara o te ika a Māui kia koutou katoa. And I won't probably go backwards around all of our whakapapa because we've got a lot of material that we wanted to cover with everybody. But just again, to tautoko with the concept and the origins of the mahi that we're doing at the moment, and just to acknowledge Papa Mark and Dr. Diana Kopua as well, but also the learnings that came from Te Kūwatawata as well, because, you know, part of this kaupapa started there, and then, you know, we're kind of, that's the honona ki Hauraki, Te Kūwatawata ki Hauraki. So it's really just that sort of spread, if you like, of the kaupapa to other parts, and hopefully to many others. Right. Now, getting back to technical things, this is my ability, hopefully, to make sure I get this right. What would a webinar be without a little bit of a presentation and some slides? So I might just get ready to kick off with the first ones, and just we'll come back to talk a little bit about the tohu, but just again to acknowledge the relationship from Tairāwhiti ki Hauraki. Oops.
Kapai.
Yeah.
So just to let all of our viewers here today know that Te Korowai Hauora or Hauraki was established in 1994, and a little bit before that there were some conversations that had started to occur about how to improve the health and well-being, particularly mental health, knowledge and support here in Hauraki. We've been providing services for just over 25 years now, and of course those services include our primary care services, our home-based support services, mental health, whānau ora, health promotion and public health services. So we kind of do a little bit of everything, and we've grown over time. We employ just over 260 people across the Hauraki Rohe, which makes us one of the biggest employers across our region. And that in a rural Rohe has an excellent impact, but it also has a huge responsibility in terms of making sure we maintain the services and the employment for our people. We cover 3 different district health board areas, which makes it a little bit unique, and of course we work closely with all of our services from Thames Hospital, Waikato DHB, and all other providers we work closely with, and of course one of the things that I establish is that we're established under the umbrella, if you like, of Hauraki Māori Trust Board, which is our iwi connection, our hononga there, and to this day we have our iwi representation as part of our board, as a part of our direct board, in recognition of that hononga. And of course you see a beautiful description of Te Taro Te Ika Māui, the fin of our ika, and that's what the Coromandel Peninsula looks like, and that's the length and width of who we support throughout Hauraki. So when we think about introducing an Indigenous model of care, if you like, one has to wonder what was the catalyst for change, and there are so many reasons to want to go and look at our own Indigenous knowledge as a way to move forward for our people. In our current iteration, we have multiple contracts and service specifications which are usually passed down to us from our DHB and or the Ministry of Health or other providers. We have silos in our mental health and addiction services. We have separation of children's services and adolescent and men, and of course whānau. We have multiple entry criteria, and most referrals come from either primary care or other providers, but not directly from whānau often. Multiple reporting requirements and indicators, predominantly focused on volumes and utilisation, not great outcomes, and of course lengthening waiting times, which was becoming a real problem for us as a service. Individual practitioners hold these caseloads, and that means that they were starting to work predominantly in isolation. Wellbeing budgets promised better access, and we're still kind of waiting to see what that looks like. And then came COVID, and I think we can't underestimate what that meant for our services, but more importantly, what it meant for having that catalyst for change. So that's just a few of the things. So we started looking into what do those Indigenous models look like, and of course most of Aotearoa will be familiar with whare tapawhā, te wheke, and other models of care. Become aware of Mahi A Atua, specifically Te Kūwatawata at that time, and Te Riana Manuel. So we started investigating, and Taima and myself went to Ngā Kōmata o Te Rangi, which was a hui held in March 2019, specifically so that we could kind of just bump into Dr. Diana Kōpua and Papa Mark Kōpua. The spin-off from that was in June. We went down and attended our first Wananga, which was a 12-hour Wananga held in the Tairāwhiti, and it really was just, that was one of the major catalysts for change. We could see already that this was going to be a model that we wanted to invest our time and our services into. In July 2019, we brought Dr. Diana and Papa Mark and the whānau of Te Kurahuna up to provide our own Wananga. So that was a 2-day Wananga, which we opened out to about 50 participants, all made up of different organisations. We wanted to make sure we socialised these concepts well in advance of implementation. And then we also went on to train 5 mataora during that time. In November 2019, the mental health RFP writing and proposal to introduce the service began in earnest, and we started negotiating to have the service, to have Dr. Diana and Papa Mark come up and actually implement it into our services. And in February 2020, we commenced implementation of Te Kūwatawata ki Hauraki, and of course further Mahi A Atua training. And as luck would have it, to some point, March 2020, COVID hits, a pandemic strike, and a decision to implement the service virtually and immediately was made by the organisation. Bye. And then we have to kind of talk about what happened from March to current. So obviously the thing about COVID, it was an emergency response. And we knew that the distress levels for all of our whānau would be greater, not just because of the threat of this pandemic, but there were things such as people losing their jobs overnight, employment overnight, housing issues, and then of course everybody being locked down. What would this mean in terms of general distress? So this is one of the things that we decided we would do, an immediate response hotline. Our project team was established. The hotline was set up and promoted to make sure that people could get access with ease. Changes made to call flow systems. We had to create a roster to make sure that we could respond virtually and or via phone. We set up our matataki, or our triage process, and a first wānanga was delivered by phone with the intention that a first wānanga would be delivered by phone or Zoom. My outcomes was introduced to support, feedback informed treatment. Zoom Vision was introduced to make sure we were creating spaces to, support our kaimahi during this time of change. And of course, marketing and promotion of the service became a priority as well. So you can see an example of that in the slide. We started distributing this information through our local papers. We started putting it on our Facebook pages and anywhere else where we could base our websites, anywhere where we could support this, and asked for other organisations to share the information as well. So remembering that this 0508 number was designed for distress. It's not about whether you were, you had a diagnosis, or whether or whether it was to do solely with mental health. We recognise that during this period of time, whānau needed support in many different ways for many different reasons. So it was answering the call of distress for our whānau.
And I guess not to let a good crisis go to waste, we went from an implementation that was going to be phased over 6 months, essentially, to a process where we started implementing it pretty much overnight. So in a 2-week period, we started the ball rolling in terms of making some changes around the way that calls would be organised and designed, how we would address them, and all those kinds of things. So it happened fairly rapidly, but I think that everyone was moving pretty quickly at that time to make some changes and be responsive. Other lines were also set up at the same time, so we were one of a few.
Yeah.
All right. You guys can hear and see me okay, eh? Yeah. Yep. And I just wanted to, I guess what we wanted to do was to have something in terms of a tohu that highlighted a little bit about, yes. I thought my video disappeared somewhere. We wanted to have a tohu that reflected what we were trying to achieve. So the whole kaupapa really was around Te Kūwatawata was one of the Atua Māori who was the guardian that stood, at the entrance way to Rarohenga. So he was the one that kind of decided if you would pass. He was the one, supporting the entrance way into the spirit world. So we've kind of likened that as an entrance way, the waharoa for all whānau to come through that are seeking distress. And we use the kaupapa and the whakaro about, they're in the kei te pō, kei te noho I te pauritanga, kei te noho I te pō, and then coming through into the service, ki te ao marama. So it's a gateway for whānau to come in. So we prefer that to the single point of entry kind of terminology, which we've seen in other places. And obviously it's deliberate, intentional that we want to achieve better outcomes for Māori, that we want to support an indigenous model of work, of practice, and to draw on mātauranga Māori. And in this kind of process, we're still all learners as well. We've introduced the one kind of process called referral, the way that people come into Wananga, so we don't talk about having sessions as such, and people don't come into just one practitioner. They come into Wananga with a group of us, with a ue, with different mixes of expertise, and the whānau bring with them whoever they want to be there as well. And within that one process, we use the pūrākau, the tikanga that goes along with being part of a wānanga. We've introduced the concepts around feedback-informed treatment, and I'll come back to that. My outcomes as part of our being very whānau-centred and outcomes approach, outcomes model approach. We already used a client management system called Consult One beforehand, and so that's kind of the place where all of the data is being kept. And we have multiple practitioners as part of the process. And introduced the mata ora role, the change agent. So the story really relates to the story of mata ora, who I guess also made that transformation and change in his for his well-being and for others, and we're using the same kind of example. The principles guiding the program, tēnei te pō nau mai te ao, is a lot about indigenising the space. So reclaiming an indigenous framework and model, and in those kind of images, those stories, the knowledge that goes with that. Ka māti ariki, ka māti tauira is really all of us remaining very active learners. And you can't be an active learner if you aren't also in a space to receive and provide feedback. So hongi hongi te whaiwhaia is really about embracing feedback as part of the culture of feedback. The tohu is part of the indigenising. So the tohu was commissioned and put together by Riana Manuel. Just, you know, sort of one of our tā moko artists as well. It's a reflection of the gateway of the Waharoa. On the top figure is Ranginui in Kikorangi. Below is Papatuanuku, and then below that is Hinenui Te Pō. So it's kind of putting those atua at the sort of the beginning of the Waharoa. And it also enables us to have some more stories about the different kind of stories that relate to their kind of journeys and our and which also can be reflected when we're working with whānau. And the patterns really are those that are taken from Hauraki. We've got our web feet, which is part and parcel of the way that the whakairo here in our wharenui, that's one of our our little kind of motifs, one of our features. And the island that the Waharoa stands on is Pouterirangi, which is the motu where Te Kūwatawata stands. So we're using this as a kind of an entrance and a way of understanding the service, and reflects Hauraki in terms of the environment, the motu, the moana, and I guess really an opportunity for whānau to come through into this space. I guess it's also a nod to the fact that, and as we're having a lot of discussions about the system reviews at the moment, part of the other reason for change is that the system we've got is broken. It is not working for our people. It is exceptionally challenging to understand. And really the only way that we think we're going to make a difference is if we reclaim that. And if we have a program, a model, a service delivery approach that actually is based upon our ideas around mana motuhake, and that it's very much community focused, community kind of owned, and basically we're in charge of what that destiny might look like, which is a very good topic at the moment, given that we've got a lot of other people who are saying exactly the same thing. We had a whole bunch of aims for the service, and we also drew on the evaluation that was done for the Te Kūwatawata ki Taida Awhiti by David Tipene Leach and the team. So, they had a list of things originally about that program that they wanted to achieve, and we're no different. So we're looking really for having that single waharoa for whānau to come through. We are exceptionally focused around achieving equity for Māori. And so as a Māori provider, if we don't do it, who will? We are unashamedly, supportive of the fact that we want an indigenous approach versus the Western kind of model. Wanted to be able to scale up the initiative if we needed to. So at the moment, while we've started off, we're mostly focusing on our hinenaro services. Not to say that that's not the end of that, and that we might grow that all of our services work in a similar way. And I think if anyone saw the previous webinar by Di, you will know exactly what she feels about how we're trying to make some system change that addresses the long-standing institutionalised racism we have in our system. Improving access at a primary mental health level, which the new funding and the new kind of wellbeing budget promise, and definitely about improving responsiveness. So instead of people waiting, which is kind of what we do in the health system, we're trying very quickly to get to whānau as quickly as possible. So at the beginning of during COVID, we would be able to do something in terms of from the time people came to service and through to first whānau, we could do in 24 hours. We're looking at eliminating silos. We have a number of contracts which say do a number of different things, and what we're trying to do at the moment is find a way of weaving them together so we can achieve everything and looking for a more outcomes-based approach. We are using a lot more collaboration with other people, so it doesn't just mean that Te Kūwatawata is about Te Korowai staff being part of the ue or the program or the Wananga. We bring in other people too. So, you know, recently we're starting to work with corrections, so instead of them just referring people to us, actually they're part of it. We've got utilising the many eyes of a diverse team. So not all of our practitioners are mental health practitioners. They bring a range of skills of working with whānau. The most important part is the human response to people, not the medical or, you know, sort of the normal kind of diagnostic or disorder approach. Definitely improving engagement. We thought we were going to have a problem with that during COVID because a lot of our services were being offered virtually, but actually that didn't prove to be a problem. What are some problems though, which I think we found, is that for many whānau have the Wi-Fi or the devices to do virtual, but you know, we worked out ways of doing things and were reasonably successful. And very strong focus around giving practitioners feedback about how they're doing. So, you know, we're not very good at having whānau say, you know, well, that session was stink, or, you know, you know, that really helped me, or I don't think we're working well together here. So this whole program is really designed to be able to kind of test that, and for whānau to be able to drive what happens. And the shared client record, really important. So I don't think we've nailed that very well with any kind of shared records, but we've got some moving towards being able to have whānau to have access to their own information, not dissimilar to the way that Manage My Health might do. The pathway for whānau when they come into the service starts off with the tono. The tono can be electronic, by phone, whichever way it comes. We got pretty good at it, but the hotline has been the most popular way of doing things, and it can come from anybody. So previously we did have a system in place where only health professionals could refer to us. Well, we changed that, whānau refer to us, and we've been really, the response from whānau has been really good. We have what we call the matataki team. So when a referral or a tono comes in, the matataki is the one that's out there having a look, you know, the same as when you're coming onto the marae. They're at the gate, they're sussing out what's going on, asking questions. Who are these people? What are the issues? So the matataki team are the ones who will respond not only to the whānau who refer, but also to the referrer themselves. So kind of gone are the days where you could just send a paper referral and that's the end of your kind of responsibility. Our matataki team will come back to the referrer and ask them for some more questions, including how engaged are you with that whānau in terms of supporting their well-being. So that's been a change for particularly for our GPs, which they're still getting adjusted to. And then the matataki will contact whānau and say, well, these are the people that we have available to you. So the ue, or the group that will be in Wananga with the whānau, it's usually 2 to 3, sometimes 4, depending, people. And the whānau will be given a little bit of a background about each of the people that are there. And we try to line up the skill sets, if you like, with what the whānau might need. And so making sure that there's a good connection. And then the first Wananga is booked. Most of those at the moment we are still doing virtually. And so that works well, and it's quicker, very much quicker than getting everyone into the room at the same time. But we are moving towards having more first Wananga as face-to-face as allowed. And for some of the referrals we had, it's easier for us to do it as a group. Particularly when we've got a large volume of referrals coming from probation, rather than doing one-on-one with each of the whānau that are sent through, we do it as a wānanga together, and we have probation there. And then if required, we have what we call the eke team. So the eke team are really the ones where the escalation, if required, happens. So they're the ones who are sort of work alongside the matataki team to say, hey, you know, which is kind of a triage process of a kind, you know, and does it need to go to the eke team first, or does it go to Wananga, you know? So we've got some of that sort of leadership around, you know, what's happening in terms of that space. The first contact questions are probably fairly common for most people. You know, we'll ask, you know, both the referrer, the tono, the kai tono, or the whānau, what are you worried about? Who else knows about your concerns? You know, have been in contact before? You know, is there danger, or, you know, are you in danger of hurting yourself or others? So the questions really that the matataki will go through, just to kind of give a little bit more information to determine you know, how urgently we need to see people, and also a little bit about, you know, who they might be best matched with. And again, the eke process is really just our risk management, if you like, and also the place where discussions can be had to make some other decisions around, do we need to know more? Is there something else that we need to understand? Who else knows about this problem? And then if there's, you know, more people that we need to be involved, and we need to escalate it up. So the eke process is part of that as well. And I'm just might pause and hand over to Ree just to have a kōrero about the Wananga process.
Yes, and thanks, Taima, for all of that amazing information. And I hope we're not overloading people, but we're trying to make sure that everybody understands to date what's occurred, why we've done what we've done. And I've just got to say, it can often make you fairly unpopular in terms of the general kind of way that services roll out. So when we talk about the challenges, you'll get to know a little bit more about that. But yeah, let's talk about the Wananga Mahi A Atua in practice, because this is where the magic happens, if you like. So one of the things that we've kind of made sure is that obviously doing it virtually, doing these wānanga virtually, sometimes doing them by phone, has been a challenge for people to acclimatise to. And of course there are issues, like Taima said, around connectivity and so on and so forth. But the intention of that wānanga is to really bring people into a space where we said that there are more than one set of eyes, if you like, or two sets of eyes. We've got multiple people in those wānanga to help support people around what is the current issue, but more importantly, using our pūrākau to help guide, to help give, relativity to what a person is experiencing at that time. So we've got to be really clear, because often people will say, well, we've heard this often, I don't understand the pūrākau. I don't know what these pūrākau are. And of course, that's that whole conversation, only working in a different way and recognition that the current system is broken. But it's also acknowledging that we have to get back to some of that knowledge that we ourselves own as a people. It has massive benefit, but it also helps to explain why we find ourselves in the position we might be. And almost all of our distress as a people, as a Māori people, can be tracked back to a process that these wānanga, these pūrākau will help people identify with. And then it helps to create that plan about how are we going to do this. Not everything has to be solved with medicine or a Western method, and this is what the wānanga hope to build on, if you like.
Sorry, Riana, we're having a little bit of stop-go on your video. I wonder if you want to hand back to Taima while you race downstairs to go and sit beside her.
Will do.
Kia ora.
For the people out there who've watched not only some of Dai's webinars, but also the wānanga that we've had live through on our Facebook page, as well as right. Let me just do this.
Right, is that audio still okay?
Yeah.
Cool. So we've had, we started off with the view that we were going to have wānanga for our staff and others to learn the various pūrākau, and that was going to be face-to-face up at Mātai Whetū. We had 1 out of the 12, and the rest all became virtual after that, after COVID. So a lot of the stories are now on our Facebook page and on the Mahi A Atua page. And so Di's managed to bring many different people together to have the same kind of conversations and to share the stories. So this picture was one of the ones that was sort of, it reflects tāne and whiro, you know, and the battles. And it's really between the battles between, you know, brothers, people who, I guess, you know, want to do some things differently, make change, and whiro who doesn't want to make change. And so the idea is really relating some of these stories through to real life in terms of, you know, why do you think the way that you do? And maybe there's some learnings about, well, what did Tāne do sort of to make a difference? How did he manage to achieve his goals even though he was often facing barriers, particularly from his own whānau? So that's just a quick introduction to the wānanga kind of space, and part of the mata ora training is about those people learning the pūrākau. So when they're in wānanga with whānau, with your mental health practitioners, with your other kind of people there, social service support people, whānau ora practitioners, you know, it brings that kind of, that richness in terms of the kōrero for the whānau that you're working with.
Yeah, I was just going to add in there too, is that it is often really hard in health because it's such, we've long worked the way we have, and though we'll acknowledge often that things aren't working, it is really hard to create change, particularly if you say, and this is the context, we use these wānanga and these pūrākau not as myths and legends, not as, you know, not as something that is not recognised as being a sincere part of how we have been, you know, how we have established ourselves, our creation stories, if you like. And I often liken that to when we're challenged around our indigenous knowledge of science, for instance. You know, we've had our first recognition with Dr. Rani Mātāmua as an example. And of course, one of the examples he always uses is that when people say to him, that's not science, that's not true science, that's not, you know, that's not something that we can tangibly look to, he challenges people, well, you get out on a bunch of boats and navigate navigate your way from place to place using myth and legend. And that's, you know, so we acknowledge that these pūrākau are very much a part of our people's creation, of our people's lives to this day, and want to make sure that we use this and integrate it into all of the mahi we do.
And I think similar in terms of many of us are still learning te reo. We're also learning our own stories. So for some of us, some of the stories are new. Even for the whānau we're working with, they're new, but they resonate with people and they go, that makes more sense to me than anything else that people have said. So we're all on that learning journey, and there's still a little bit of a mamae around the fact is that why did we not know this before? So just moving along, I was mindful of our time, and just wanted to also, you know, introduce, I guess, the quantitative as well as qualitative aspect of reporting. So we do have, I guess, in terms of the backbone of things, an approach and a model. We've adopted the feedback-informed treatment, and there is a whole kaupapa and wānanga about that, but it's really very much about focusing on the relationship with whānau, the level of engagement, the therapeutic kind of outcomes from that, whānau being able to tell people in real time how they are tracking, how they are feeling, and rating that over time. So it's a good way of us being able to collect both sessional and outcome data. So this is our outcome, you know, reporting tool, which, you know, whānau are actually giving us their view about how they are feeling and tracking. For whānau that are in the red, so it's kind of got the, the red, amber, green kind of ways of how are people tracking. People in the red are the ones, people that are discussed at what used to be sort of our new version of an MDT case review. So we do those every week, so we can have a conversation about, well, how come they're stuck there or gone back there? Are we being successful in terms of that engagement? Is it the right kind of combination of people working with them? And we review and reflect on our own sort of, ability. And so what are we doing, not doing right, or what can we do better? And then looking, really the wider team also has that opportunity to provide some feedback as well as whānau themselves. It's a much different way to the way that we were running MDTs before. And it also, I think, is strongly more focused on less judgmental language. People being more positive about, the way that they are working with whānau, and also, I guess, opportunity for better ideas to be talked about, as opposed to people kind of being stuck and sort of saying, well, I'll just go into, things aren't working, but not with a whole lot of solutions around that.
I was just going to say, so one of the things that we want to be clear about too throughout the process when we're giving feedback is the fact that there's nothing about them without them. Yeah. It's an important philosophy, one that in health we often don't pay enough attention to, and we're trying to break that mold as well. So when we do something without the people who are at the centre of the conversation, then we are moving into a space where we're trying to do things to people, as opposed to doing things with people as they determine they want it to be done.
And in terms of how we're tracking, so we put together a little bit of our data, and I'd have to say it's always interesting, trying to get down to, what are other people doing. We've asked, and we're looking at other people's data, DHB data as well. This is for the financial year beginning 1 July through to the year that's just finished. What we sort of noticed is that we tended to have more non-Māori in our service than Māori. And we really wanted to address that and make an improvement about that. We had some people on, reasonable waiting times depending on which practitioner they were deemed to be seeing. And so that creates a bottleneck. But what we can sort of noticed over time is that from, I think, COVID kicked in officially mid-March. Yeah. Into February, mid-March. So you can see our volumes dropped there, but have steadily increased. So the service prior to February, well, really from January up to January, was our traditional kind of referral process using our traditional, previous model. And then really everything from February on is really how we're tracking. And I guess the part that's really kind of pleasing to see is that we're having more Māori come into the service. The numbers, the volumes are actually increasing as well. Now,
sorry, while you're sitting in the data, I've got a question. Is there data for all the age groups?
Yes. Yep, that's all age. We do. I was going to break it down and also look at gender, but I thought for today it was simpler just to kind of keep it at that high level. Yep. So I just guess in summary, COVID was a great opportunity to make some changes, and we pushed go, and then everything that went with it. So we sort of outlined really what was happening beforehand in terms of the way our service ran. I think one of the big parts of Diane's influence for us is really changing the language, changing the focus. So, we're talking about whānau in distress, not people with drug and alcohol addiction. We're talking a little bit about, people sitting in a wāhi pauri, not necessarily talking about depressive illness. And then we've gone through to sort of make some changes in terms of the way that the service is now being organised, and sort of, some of the changes in terms of practice, They're particularly challenging for our practitioners and clinicians who are used to having their own caseload, one-on-one with someone for weeks on end. And now actually they come into the service and we have a Wananga discussion about who is the best person to meet their needs, and we offer those opportunities to whānau. So, and running rosters, which are the priority for people, as well as, first Wananga is the most important part. We need people there so that that response time is as short as possible. We're not an acute crisis service. We manage crisis during the business hours, and I guess where we need to, we refer on. But we don't sort of do that other kind of after hours crisis work, which is still provided by the DHB.
Yeah, and I think that we want to make sure that that whole philosophy about no discussion about whānau without them, that we keep, that we keep a service that's based on Indigenous knowledge and pūrākau, and really that new language, because this is not just about changing a service. This is about changing an entire mindset of health and the way that we practice it across a number of spectrums. Yes, starting in Here Ngaro, but that won't be the only place that you see these changes start to occur.
And our last slide, I guess, it wouldn't be it would be amiss of us not to talk about the challenges. I mean, and like any major change, and even COVID created a lot of challenges as well as opportunities, but we've had a number of different changes that have required navigation through different processes, finding ways to support staff who were very fixed and focused on working in a particular kind of way and are still struggling with the new way and want to go back to the old way. So how do we keep them that way? Even some of the conversations around institutional racism, bias, white privilege, all those kind of terms and those kind of conversations have been very challenging for people. I think that's probably one of the biggest parts, really, is understanding, what does that all mean? And then, how do I either perpetuate it? How am I part of the problem? Or what do I need to do to kind of get unstuck and to support a different direction?
Yeah, and I think as an organisation, you have to manage what, the effects of change for people, because obviously there will always be the human element where people question where they sit inside these changes. Why are we doing this? And of course, we go back to every time that the system in its current context is broken. There's no use perpetuating the same system if it is broken, and we know it is on so many different levels. So change has to come. The introduction of Te Kūwatawata ki Hauraki is not something really brand new. This is a service that has been implemented previously. It is a service that has been evaluated. It is a system that screams and demands change. And not only does it call for using that indigenous sort of context or indigenous model, but it's actually requiring of us to examine all of those issues around racism, all of those issues around decolonisation of the system. And it challenges us to be better and to do better in those spaces, because New Zealand has agreed that equity is an issue that needs to be addressed. But one of the ways that we address equity is by making sure we understand how we contribute to it when we don't recognise those other factors. When we sit there and you can't say, oh yeah, I want to do an equity-based approach and then ignore Indigenous frameworks and ignore treaty frameworks and ignore all of those factors that actually will bring about that change. But of course, in the challenge area, the challenges we've had were identified in the evaluation. So sometimes we kick ourselves because the information was there. we just, you know, it's like anything, you can be aware of it, but it's not until it starts to rise inside your own organisation that you go, okay, there's the issue now. We have to respond to that. So managing the expectation around primary care is a huge one. The new contracts coming in now from the Ministry and the DHB, which are based on, again, Western models. Yeah. So we see that, you know, the latest round of primary integrated mental health contracting, and again, it's based on an American-based model of care and philosophy. So we now, you know, this is our constant struggle as an organisation, is to try and make sure that we are staying true to these frameworks that we choose to have as part of the way that we work with our people, and that we don't have to keep apologising for it. We will work with people to manage their expectation, but at the end of the day, we've put a line in the sand and said that actually this is how we intend to practice from here on in, and that is predominantly why Te Kūwatawata ki Hauraki has become such an amazing part of our work, but it will continue, I believe, to be a challenging part as well.
Sorry, we have a plethora of questions that have been coming through as you guys have been speaking, and I'm going to go backwards a little bit. If you're happy to just pause there, and I'll try and give you a chance just to maybe have a summary comment at the end. I'd also recommend anybody who hasn't seen Mark and Di's webinar to go back and have a look at that, because in terms of some of the questions about power and privilege and racism, that was discussed at quite a deep level at that last Wananga. But one of the questions we've got, which came up twice, was really around volunteering and engaging volunteers in terms of service, and what requirements are there for people to volunteer in there?
We love volunteers. So if you, and I can't say that enough, because of course we are a kaupapa Māori organisation, a charitable trust. We welcome everybody coming along and being part of this journey. So by all means, come and see us. Time is your lady. She'll be able to sort stuff out. But you know, the bigger the contribution and the more we socialise this, the better.
Yeah.
Plus, we've got whānau who have had the experience of working in the new model, who are kind of going, "This is really cool. You know, I could do this too." You know, and it makes sense because it sort of is not applying a you know, really technical Western model to the way that we're working. It's just working with people. So we're quite keen to sort of see whoever wants to support the kaupapa, and I think there's a lot of people recruiting at the moment.
Yeah, I'd also know that, you know, there's a chance for people to engage in this training themselves if they do work for organisations similarly. They may not be based in Hauraki, but there's a chance for them to work with local providers that are very interested in picking this up. I'm pretty sure you answered this question, but I just want to double check with you that my outcomes and feedback informed trauma are not necessarily built into Consult 1. Is that correct?
No.
They're completely different. Okay, that's fine. I think that was answered. I think the person was happy with that. So another question is about the numerous retelling of a tangata whaiora or a whānau story, and how your process around mātataki, ue and eke kind of, I guess, supports whānau so that this doesn't happen perhaps, or can you explain a little bit more how the process makes it easier or on whānau? And then the other kind of side question to that, sorry, while you're thinking, is what happens when tangata whaiora may not always have whānau to support this process? So, hei a kōrua.
The second question is easier. If they don't have whānau to come with them, they just come and we will support them. And so it doesn't matter. It also doesn't matter if you're Māori or Pākehā. You know, it's open to anybody that wants to be part of and have this service. So it's for everybody. In terms of not retelling stories, because we do have people who have used the services and have long histories. The matataki process is short in terms of that. It's really just assessing the need right then and there in terms of distress. Then when people go into Wananga, really it's up to the whānau to determine how much they want to share. So it's not a kind of like, tell me all about your, you know, your clinical history and things like that. whānau share what they want to share. They do, as part of the Wananga, identify what they want to achieve. What are your goals? How can we support you to get there? And that might require referral to other people or to continue in Wananga with the sessions. But we do, I guess, keep the records of, what does happen in our client management system. So, we have a record there, but really whānau don't have to repeat everything. They share what they want to share, what's important to them.
Yeah. So, I was just going to say there's a lot of action going up about a presenter or a book that by Robin DiAngelo, and it's called White Fragility. Whānau, it's an excellent read. It's not a really long read, but it really helps to, because we talked about this just a few minutes ago, one of the issues or the challenges that, that you often have to speak to is around the process of white fragility, of racism, and how we acknowledge and identify that. Whilst, it's not about hurting people's feelings, but Robin DiAngelo does a fine job of describing it from, I suppose, a white woman's perspective as well. Because one of the things we know is that there are a lot of our Māori academics, our Māori whānau who have also written about racism. And of course, that's from our perspective, I suppose, as Indigenous people. What's really nice is when we start to see people like Robin DiAngelo who are describing what white fragility looks like, and more importantly, the impact it has on Indigenous people and on services when it's in flight. And I think for anybody who reads this book, you will have either been engaged in a process where you've experienced this yourselves, or you've behaved in a manner that might perpetrate that kind of philosophy. So it's a great read, and she has lots of YouTube and TED Talks as well. So I think Graham's done a great job of
promoting
putting those people,
I think that's awesome. I think there's been a lot of discussion, and there are a lot of resources that are out there in the social media space at the moment, especially with things that are happening with Black Lives Matter. I think that's really hit a chord for not just Black people, but also Indigenous people across the world. And even just thinking about some of the social media commentary that's coming through around some of the data and stats around Māori during COVID, post-COVID, it's been really interesting to listen to how those are coming out with a bit more of an equity lens these days. So there was a couple of other questions that were related. One was around using maybe different cultural pūrākau with people of different cultures. Is that something that your service has considered or is likely to do in order for people to find their own resonance within their own heritage?
I think the whole, what we tend to do inside Mahi A Atua is that we acknowledge those pūrākau from our Indigenous perspective. So these are our creation stories. Remember, not only do we have a large percentage of our population who cannot speak Māori, but we also have a large percentage of our people who would not even recognise a pūrākau if it, was served to them on a platter at this point. So this is about us making sure that we honour that Indigenous knowledge and those Indigenous stories and bringing them back into the light. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that other people's cultures, nor their own pūrākau, are not important. What it does mean, though, is that if you need, if that's something you need to learn more about, or something that you want to have as part of your experience, if you like, then it's something that you should be looking at. Because what this teaches us, this framework and this model of care teaches us, is that by partnering all of these different parts of the knowledge base, it's about really reaffirming an individual's own mana motu hake, to drive their own, their own wellness, to be able to live inside their own skin. So these opportunities are there for everybody. And I think what the model tells us is that that is a successful way of dealing with these issues, that distress is so much more than just an addiction and or a diagnosis. It's a reality for every one of us, and COVID proved that, because when you lock the team of 5 million down,
you know, distress was everywhere and real for everyone. So that's the long answer to a very short question, sorry.
I guess one of the other questions that came through was around the use of wānanga virtually and on the phone and how that impacts on practice, and really about, have you got any tips or, you know, or tips or ideas to really enhance that process for people who are delivering, you know, tautoko at a distance?
Yeah, make sure, I mean, there are so many, and, you know, health was not the only sector who felt that pinch. Education certainly felt it as well. So, you know, we can have Wi-Fi and people have got phones, yes, and sometimes smartphones and, you know, and skinny Wi-Fi modems and all this kind of language became a part of the norm. Māori have traditionally been a kanohi, kika kanohi kind of a people, right? So first of all, this, as we can all see right now, achieves some of that. You know, we're coming to you, you can see us, we can see, you know, those people who are coming in via chat, and we can see Kim. So this medium works to an extent. The phone, of course, for a lot of our people who cannot access these kind of, you know, devices, etc., will work to an extent. There does have to be that follow-up, we acknowledge. And of course, COVID just meant we had to do it differently. But I will say, here on the Coromandel, on the peninsula, we have long had to use these kind of measures because, of course, when we flood, every road is closed. We can't move about our peninsula. So that means, you know, doctors do have to do, we had to implement virtual services a long time ago to make sure people could be serviced. So I think there are challenges. I think many of us would say we're not comfortable in this space at times. I really think at the end of the day, it comes down to, again, you know, nothing about them without them. Tell us what you think. Give us feedback. Is this working for you? And if not, as we move through the COVID levels, let's see where we go to next.
We've got time for one more question, and then maybe we probably need to wrap it up and get some final reflections. So one of the questions from Stephanie has been, is there a limit to how long you will work with a person, with a whaiora?
A good question. Yes, but I mean, not without having gone through a number of steps, because I think one of the questions that comes up as part of the also the case review, but the Zoom vision. So Zoom vision is, you know, online supervision. Is, you know, the question about, well, how come that person's been on, you know, in the service or in your case for that long? What are you doing? What are the outcomes? Is there any improvement? What have you tried or changed? And those kind of things. And really sort of saying, you know, is there another, you know, opportunity or someone else that could pick up or do a better job? So yes, we do. So, because that used to be an issue, was that we got to a stage when we couldn't bring new people into service because people were holding on to caseloads where they probably weren't being effective. So as much as we're looking at how people come into the service, it's also about how we transfer people out or transition them back to, you know, the community or whoever. So there needs to be some processes around that. You can't keep people in service if you're not making a difference forever.
And I think that's a really important part of this service, is that we're asking all the time for feedback. Is this, you know, is this working for you? Whereas traditional services will have a set, you know, like if you look at a PHO contract, for instance, it'll have 6 weeks of, you know, one-on-one counselling, as if there's any kind of a time or a limit you could put on a person's therapy. And I think the best person to inform anybody about how they're trucking along are our whānau. So, you know, that's kind of the best feedback we can have. Yep, there's some indicators that tell us they're moving, or they're, you know, that their wellness is increasing. But also to note though, if you then are able to, you know, move out of the service, then, and, you know, kia pua wai, then you might need us again, and you can enter back into it just as easily.
Yeah.
There's another couple of questions, but what I might do is post them onto Facebook, our discussion group, and hopefully you guys will get a chance to, or I'll email them through and then repost them up as your answers back onto the Facebook discussion group, if that's okay.
Yeah,
what's that?
I recognise some of the people, they can just email me.
There you go. You've got, grab Taima's email her. So have you got any final reflections, Korua?
I guess we're at the very beginning of a journey. We started off with the view of taking a longer term kind of plan and getting better at things and what have you, but we pushed go and we've just started doing it. So one of the things that we talk a little bit about is leaning into the uncertainty. Because some of us don't like to go somewhere unless we've got it all perfect, got all the answers, know what's going to happen next. We do not. And daily, we do not. So it's getting comfortable about not always knowing how it's going to go, but also being flexible. So we talk a little bit about, being able to pivot and sort of, to kind of shape shift like Tāne and do all those kinds of things so that we're, a little bit more agile. The other thing we also talk a little bit about is failure is also a really good opportunity for learning. And we do that quite well. So if you're not prepared to fail, then you're not going to be able to learn. So we're all still learning and feels a bit clumsy at times, but I think the direction of travel is the right way to go, and we'll get better at things over time. And as other people come to join us and support the kaupapa, which I guess the exciting part now is that the rest of the country is really interested in it. So it just means we're all going to be able to talk to each other and have the same kind of understanding and share that language. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, and I suppose the last thing that I want to go back to, of course, are our guiding po, if you like. Tēnei te pō, nau mai te ao. If you had to describe things, indigenising our space is such an important part of what we need to do all around the service provisions we have, whether it's the Ministry of Health or Oranga Tamariki or any of these kind of factions. I would challenge all of these organisations, ACC, the Ministry of Education, tēnei te pō, nau mai te ao, indigenize our spaces. It's good for everybody. Ka mā te ariki, ka mā te tauira, remain an active learner. It's okay to make mistakes. We learn from those. We grow from those. Be prepared to be challenged, and don't be afraid of that fact, and sit still and listen to what you're being told. Just accept it. You're doing it badly. You're not doing it right. It's all good. It's all great feedback. And of course, hongi te whaiwhaia, embrace negative feedback. It's a really hard lesson as a human being to sit still and embrace negative feedback. We always talk about it and we do it so poorly, but you have to be ready to hear the good stuff, which is great, and then also the negative stuff, because there is where Dr. Diana Corporal will tell you every time you will find the gold nugget. And she's right. Sit there, listen, take it, and then make a difference with it. And I think, those kind of po have helped us to recognise that we have to make a difference. We might be small as an organisation. People won't know our name. People won't even know where we are half the time. But that doesn't mean that we can make a huge difference. And this is our contribution to making a difference. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora kōrua, ngā mihi mahama kia kōrua mō tēnei wā. We encourage you to post any pārtai for Riana and Taima on our Community Research Facebook discussion group, and we'll try and get responses in the next few days. People have asked about your slides. I'm hoping that you're happy with us to share your slides with them, so we'll email that out to anybody who registered, and we'll also try and put them up on our Community Research closed Facebook discussion group. I'd like to mahi to you again for sharing your mahi, your wero, your whakaaro and inspiration with us today. Mahi A Atua is a powerful tool for reconceptualising hauora, ourselves, our whānau and our roles, and perpetuating and addressing the systems that fail to serve us. And I think somebody from Te Kurahuna put up a link there, so www.mahiaatua.com. If you want to learn more about getting some training in that for yourself, for your team, for your service, for your org. And if you'd like to be notified of when we're broadcasting our next webinar, which is likely to be focused on how community response organisations are recovering, I guess, in a post-COVID world, please join our Community Research Facebook page and discussion group again. Please subscribe to our monthly e-newsletter by emailing communications@communityresearch.org.nz. And thank you again all for joining us today. So as we said, a video copy of the webinar will be available later this week. And Mauri ora, kia koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora.
The Community Research website offers a hub for good community research and researchers. It's the place for the public to find and share evidence about effective community practices. The website collects research and evidence and organizes these so that they can be easily accessed and used by other groups. You can access this research and browse by category, by a list of quick-link topics, or by searching for something specific. All of the research is free to download. The Community Research site is all about excellence and effective practices. You can view recordings of past webinars and find out about future ones. The webinars share evidence about what's working in the community sector. Published by Community Research in 2007, the Code of Practice provides the standards and guidelines for doing research. It's the place to start if you're thinking of undertaking research with or in a community or iwi. As well as the collection of research, we keep a register of experienced researchers who are skilled at working with iwi and communities. To find a researcher who can help you, we have a filter system which allows you to find people based on location, qualification, ethnic group, and area of expertise. The Community Research website is a unique resource for the community sector to use and share. It matters because communities who learn well will do well. It matters because it evidences what's working for us. For researchers and community people alike, we've made it as easy as possible to share your research on our website. Korowai Hauora. Uploading material is quick and simple. Save your work as a PDF and head over to Share Research. Answer a few questions that help us tag and organize the research so it's easy for people to find. If you're a researcher and skilled at working with communities, you can add your details to the directory of researchers so that you can be found. Community research keeps you updated and informed. This helps make you more effective. If you want to stay updated about the latest research, informed about new resources and our upcoming webinars, head over to sign up for our e-news on the home page. Community research is a rich resource built for and by the community. For it to reach maximum potential, we rely on you to contribute, participate, and support the resource to grow and thrive. Mā te kotahitanga e ora ai tātou.